Testing.
Yes, hello again. We have some people following us online already, and I'm very glad to see so many people in here as well. My name is Thomas Frostberg, and I'll be trying to entertain you for the next 20 to 25 minutes or so, and leave plenty of room for question and discussion in the end of the session. If there is something immediately that you don't understand while I'm talking, please raise your hand. Otherwise, if it's a more general comment, we can save time for that in the end. And we will also see if there are questions coming up. My friends here will help me with questions from the online community as well. So the headline for this talk is about how to be successful in the business life and what kind of skills you would need to become a successful entrepreneur or innovator. Lars Kulin will speak later this week in the business track, and he's sort of taking the approach more from the skills you need to be a leader or a boss in a big company, and what you need to have, what kind of approach you need to take if you are going to be employed in a company. And I'm more taking the startup entrepreneur, start your own business approach. So if you want to get the whole spectrum, you go to Lars' session later this week as well, and you get both aspects. So shortly about myself, I work as a reporter, and I've covered the business life for the last 15 years or so. And it's in the role that I have in my daily life that I'm going to talk today, rather than my scout life, which is as international commissioner for the Guides and Scouts of Sweden. I was also head of communication for the 22nd World Scout Jamboree. But the things I'm going to talk about and the basics for that is the experience of covering and writing and reporting about especially Scandinavian startups and entrepreneurs. I'm working as a senior business columnist for one of the major newspapers in Scandinavia. Before that, I founded my own company in the media sector, so I also have the entrepreneurial experience personally. And I've been working with the San Francisco Chronicle as a staff writer through a Stanford University program as well, covering entrepreneurs and venture capital in Silicon Valley. So that is a sort of a quick background. And you can see I divided this slide into employed or self-employed to the left and the volunteer side to the right, which is pretty typical when you write or read about someone's bio or curriculum. But actually, a few years ago, working with the Jamboree, I got a call from a headhunter and said, like, your profile is very, very good. It's very interesting for a job position we have. We're recruiting someone to a global position in the area of press and PR, and you have exactly the skills we need. So here's the thing that I'm going to come back to that in the end. There was something wrong in how I presented my bio to them, this one. If you have any ideas, you can consider that or think about that until the end of the presentation, where we sort of return to how we usually present what we do in our daily life as employees or running our own business versus doing volunteer work. So that's a little cliffhanger for this session. So what are the skills you need to be successful in business life? Well, I take this in two steps. So I start with the innovators and continue with the entrepreneurs. And I'll try to explain the different steps, but the first one is when you come up with the idea that you want to develop and run as a business. And the second step is where you actually take that idea or invention over to becoming an innovation and something that you can sell as a service or a product. Because it's not always that the innovator and the entrepreneur is the same person. It's rather quite common that you hand over or realize to expand your idea in the commercial life, you need someone else to do that if you're an innovator. And there are entrepreneurs that have a certain skill to develop business, but maybe not being the ones coming up with the ideas. However, starting with the innovator side, to the left, this is the sort of classical way we used to see how you run business in the good old days, I call it. And to the right, it's sort of the trends that we can see coming up today in when you look at how innovators work. So before, I would say this is a bit stereotyping, so you could argue that this is not completely right and wrong, etc. But it's an attempt to make it more clear what kind of shift is going through in or ongoing in the business world. So the typical way of looking at an innovator in the big company structure is that innovation used to happen top down. You decided, okay, so we have a good car. We need a car that runs faster or use less fuel. And people that study this say that it normally is a very dumb way to run innovation, because that might take you from point A to point B. So innovation would be a linear process. So yes, if you want to make a car consume less fuel, that might work, like 10% less fuel. You can decide that from the management level. But if you want a car that runs on something completely different than gas, then it's probably not the easiest way to decide from the very top how the final solution would be. But it's rather a bottom-up perspective needed, where people actually go out and search for the solutions. So researchers that have been looking at this says that the more chaotic way to run innovation processes, but the smarter way is to have a bottom-up approach, because then you use all the different ideas and wild and crazy people that have maybe not managed to get up to the top level of a company, but they have a lot of ideas. This is actually how Ericsson started developing their first mobile phones. The management team was in Stockholm in Sweden, and they had about 20 people in the southern part of Sweden that had an idea somewhere in the 80s about that you could actually call not when you were at home or in your office, but walking around in the city, talking in a small device. And the people in Stockholm said, like, that sounds crazy. We don't want those guys to disturb our core business, which were the fixed line telephone system. So they said, well, you can have a small place there in southern part of Sweden where you do this crazy stuff, so you don't disturb us. And they did, and they came up with a cell phone. So this is kind of 20 engineers being, aside from all the others, developing something that no one maybe really believed in the beginning. So what the researchers say and what they see, and I'm going to give you some names if you want to go deeper into this, is that the real groundbreaking innovations, not taking the innovation from point A to point B, but from where you are today into a completely new direction. It happens when you actually don't know what you're looking for in the beginning, and the intersection between different disciplines is where you typically combine people and skills and knowledges that didn't meet before and might come up with something as crazy as a cell phone, where you can actually walk around and talk. And it's also the fact that innovation is not just happening today in the big research labs of the companies. There are a lot of good processes going on in the research labs, but it's not where everything can be developed or where all new ideas can be seen. The big pharmaceutical companies have discovered this the hard way. There are almost no new medicines coming out of projects that started in a big pharmaceutical company today. They have started to shift their way of doing research and development, and are instead looking for small companies, fast-moving, that have done the first sort of very hard steps towards a new drug. And when they have passed some of the most sort of difficult stages and have success, then the big companies are ready to take over when it becomes a phase where you have to expand the different studies you do, which is very cost. You need a lot of money, and that is not something that the small companies can really afford. So you see the combination of the more innovative climate in the small companies, the more drastic innovations, groundbreaking things going on, and then the big companies have a structure where they can deliver this. And the best innovations, which is maybe the most important here, is that it's not just the researchers and the specialists that have all the skills in the world that will deliver the most groundbreaking things, but it's rather that the diverse teams where maybe people that used to develop drugs meet with people that have no clue about that from the beginning, but they have an idea about what problems needs to be solved. Classical example is, if you look at the airline business, many of the companies that started with low-cost airlines said that they started with people that didn't know anything about running an airline company. So that's why they came up with different ideas, different approaches, how to do it. Then, of course, they need to hire pilots, the specialists, to fly the planes. Otherwise, we would be in deep problem. But what they say is by going into business without all the sort of background, all the history of how you should do it or how you should run the business, then you can actually make more change and be more effective in your innovation. And just to be clear, before going over to the entrepreneurial side of it, the definition of innovation is important here because it's the creation and delivery of new customer value. So it's not just coming up with a new idea or a new product or so. It's something that you can actually reach out to an audience that want to use that service or want to use that product and get something out of it, not just a fun thing, but something useful. It could be entertaining, it could be medicine, it could be logistics, but it should still deliver some customer value in the marketplace, and not just for a very short time. Most things could have a sort of some attention for a short while, but it should be something that you could run a sustainable business for a longer time, producing or selling it. So some of the skills here will come back when we go over and look what is important to become a successful entrepreneur. Again, looking at the sort of good old days. For example, we used to start local and then grow global step by step. That is the usual. When I started to cover the business life about 15 years ago, all the manager tended to say, well, we want to address the local market, the Scandinavian market, then the European market, then the global market. And this was something you can hear all around the world. Today, it's more, especially in some industries dealing with internet-based products and solutions. You start your company somewhere in the world. It doesn't matter so much where you start it, because you can distribute your software or your the next Facebook solution or whatever it is from more or less any place in the world and reach a global audience almost immediately. And it's also changed the sort of perspective that you have a boss that knows everything and can tell you the direction, because suddenly you have a lot of smart brains all around the world, and they can actually contribute to your company or your development process in a way that you couldn't do before. You couldn't really afford flying around the globe and talk to people all around the world. But today you can reach out through online communities. You can use the crowd out there to get the smartest ideas. And if you're a software company, you could even have developers around the world working for you in different open source climates. Which also from a management perspective changes the whole perspective. How do you motivate people in other places that might not even work for you as an employee? They do it on a more voluntary basis. They might not even get paid in the first steps when they deliver different software solutions to you. So it's also changing the approach where the research and development departments of a company used to be a very secret thing. No one outside that area should be allowed to know what's going on and what would be the next product, because then a competitor could steal that idea. If you want to use the global crowd to help developing what you're doing, of course you need to give them something to work on as well. You need to tell them what direction you're going. And that is also a shift in how you reach out, how you motivate people, and how you communicate with them, all through the development process. Here again, we're going back to one of the key points in the previous slide about innovators, where you used to hire experts to solve a specific problem that you had defined from a top level. Today, we see more and more companies looking at hire diverse teams to find the right combination of people to really deliver and solve the problems that the companies face. And we have also seen a strong belief in a strategy. you do a strategy for the next 5 years for your company, and then everyone in the company should move in that direction. And the latest research points rather to the fact that if you think that you can come up with a strategy that would take you to be a global leader and your company to be the number one, it's likely that someone else has already come up with that specific idea. If it's as easy as that, you just find the best strategy. So what the people of researchers looking at this instead says is that you should focus on trying to find the right way of constantly adopt and adjust. So your strategy should rather be to open up for new input all along the way, because no company, no CEO, no manager could really know what's going to change in the next 5 years. The strategy you make today might be out of date tomorrow because some other companies release a new smart device or something. And then you also need to have the diverse team that can give you input and feedback along the way. And then maybe a major point that's coming up when you look at the innovation climate in Silicon Valley, California, is what most of us normally is afraid of. We don't like the word failure. It's dangerous. It's something really, I mean, and if we fail, we don't want to talk about it because it's embarrassing. And when I've interviewed people in the financial markets, venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, some of them say, we will never invest in a company where the management team have not been through a couple of failures before, because then we're going to pay for their first failure, and we don't want to do that. So we want to have people that are experienced in failures, so they have learned something on the way and can move forward from another standpoint, and that are used to take the knowledge you get out of failure to move forward. And here are just quickly a couple of books if you want to go deeper into these different ideas. Frans Johansson is a Swedish researcher that moved to the US, been studying at Harvard, and been writing a couple of books, The Medici Effect and the Click Moment, about the fact what happens if you combine different industries and competences and try to reach that intersection between different disciplines. Whereas Curtis Carlson and his colleagues from SRI has written about, SRI is the Stanford Research Institute, the 5 disciplines for creating what customers want, which is one of the sort of main books in the innovation literature. And there are a lot of innovations coming out of the Stanford Research Institute as well, which is interesting to see. They've been through the process themselves. So with the background of what is important, what skills do you need to have to become a successful entrepreneur and a successful innovator, I would like to try to summarize those things into what are the skills you really need to be this successful person in business and run a successful company. Well, one major point then, the fact that you need to realize that the crowd is smarter than yourself. All the people out there, I mean, just look at this, the crowd in here is smarter than I am, which is always challenging when you're gonna sort of tell you a lot of smart ideas. But that is a fact that you need to embrace, and you need to take into account when you run your company and how you work. And be open to input from others, and not just really be open, but to love getting input. It might be annoying, it might be frustrating, it might be that people send you ideas that actually tell you that, okay, I missed some major point here early on, and I need to change the whole way that I've been working for a year or so. But if you don't do that, you could rest assured that you will probably be out of business instead. So embracing the knowledge of the crowd and try to engage them and be your fan club, helping you develop your company moving forward. The second one is that there is no single strategy that will take you to success. It's rather that with a diverse team and again an openness to new ideas and an openness to sort of the wildest and most crazy things, it is what will take you forward. So as Frans Johansson says in one of his books, actually the most important thing is not to make a strategy where to go, but rather have a strategy that puts you in different positions, opening up for new ideas, meeting with people that you didn't expect could contribute to your company. The third and major bullet point is that you need to understand that the global market is a key factor here. Not just in the traditional sense that you want to have customers all around the world, but you need to take into account that you don't start a company in one market and move into different markets in a slow way, but you could be global from day one. And if you could be that, there would be companies in Asia, in Africa, or any other region of the world that will also be global. So if you 5-10 years ago could run your business and grow slowly, you now will compete with people from all around the world, and you need to address that and think how you can use that as something to manage to get your company successful before someone else is doing it. And also embracing the fact that failure could be good. Of course, not everything you fail with is good, but the lessons you make from the failures is important. And if you're able to learn from those experiences, you could move forward much faster. That's also why fail forward is kind of a word or phrase that is used in the business world. So try to, you don't need to repeat other people's mistakes and not read about them or learn, but you need to make your own mistakes as well, because you can't just read about others, what they have done and what mistakes they have done, but you need to do it yourself to understand and feel what it feels going through a failure and learn from that and have your own experiences. So before going into the sort of cliffhanger thing, I could say if I then move from my daily life position as a business reporter and business columnist over to my role as a scout and a scout volunteer, it's pretty interesting if you translate these points into what we do in scouting. I would say that the ability to fail and learn from failure, I think we call it learning by doing in the daily life here. And if we talk about the crowd and how we work with input from others, isn't that just what we do in the patrols? How we work in a very informal, okay, we have a patrol leader, but it's compared to a boss at work, the patrol leader is still a more informal, and normally you select it in another kind of process. So it's more like the teams you see many workplaces putting up today and say, okay, so you have the group you work with, but then we need to form a team with people from different departments to solve something. That is a bit like a patrol, or maybe a couple of patrols as a camp, meeting together and solving a problem, like cooking dinner together tonight or putting up some tents. And understanding the global market, Jim. Just look around you in this room. Look at this Congress and look about the Scout movement in general. Actually, I would say that what we do and what we have done for a long time is where business life is now moving. So we have a position where we have done a lot of things right that we could actually learn and teach to others as well and share. But I think sharing, it's not like we have the whole solution. Going back to what I've said before, we are one player in the world, but not the only one, and we don't have all the solutions and all the right answers. We could also learn from others by reaching out, and I think that's why this Congress is also so interesting, because we have our educational methods presented here, discussed, debated, but we also have people from academia, from business life, and from government and other sectors coming in and talking about their perspectives on education, which could develop us further. So to conclude, going back to my bio that I showed in the beginning, talking about how you sort of do some things when you get paid for it at work and some things when you don't get paid for it and doing it for scouting. What happened when I was in talks with this recruitment company or headhunting company about, because I thought they called me for a position as I said, within press and PR for a global company. And I thought, okay, so while I work as a business reporter, they're probably looking at me and my bio on LinkedIn from the business reporter perspective and say, okay, so he's reporting about these things today, so probably he could also be a communicator on these things. Well, I was wrong. What they said, that they had looked at my LinkedIn profile and come up with the fact that obviously I had experience from a leading global educational organization. I'd been running communication for a global event, a World Scout Jamboree, addressing communication within different cultures, regions, 160 countries in the world, trying to communicate the message about a global event, which this company operates in approximately the same number of countries, cultures, and regions. Also, how you can describe what we do in scouting is training young people to become leaders of diverse teams, because we meet in smaller groups back home, but we have also this global network. And whereas we combine these things, we work in the small groups, in the teams, but we could also go out and meet the talent pool of some 40 million people all around the world. And that is quite unique, I would say, if you think about this in business terms. And more than anything else, I think this learning by doing, the thing that we do in the Scout method with learning by doing, is something that we could see is very, very valid in the business community, in the work life, whether you're an employee or whether you start your own company. So I would say if we take a step back and look at our own activities and our own bios and how we present what we do, it's not a huge step between the volunteer life and the daily work life. And actually this headhunting company said, why don't you write a bio where you just combine all the things under one headline, experiences, and then you can make a point whether you were paid or not. But that's not the most important thing. Is you explain what you achieved in these different positions. So instead of just writing, I was doing this between these 3 years or something, you explain the result of the project you worked on, whether it was in the work life or in scouting. And it was a very interesting experience, because I had to reflect upon what I've done both in my business life and as a business reporter, and on the other side what I've done in the voluntary engagement in Scout movement. And that is something I think you could take with you from this Congress when you go back home. Consider what you've done and what you're doing in both your different work and voluntary life, and share that with the people that you work with in scouting and in work. Share that with family and friends, and I think the development further could be really, really interesting. So I've saved quite a lot of time in the end, so I hope you have comments, questions, and we'll see if there's something coming in from the online community. Not yet. No, but they're more than welcome to send questions. And you could also find me on different channels if you want to continue the discussion after this little seminar. Yeah, we have one question. You want to actually come up here?
Hello. Oh, thank you. Hello. Yeah, my name is Conrad from Uganda Scouts Association. Some of you are putting on this wristband, but probably don't really understand what it's all about. It's an innovation that we're doing in Uganda, and it's a Scout innovation which we are taking global. And thank you very much, Thomas, for creating this session. We are going to explain more in the afternoon session, which is starting from 3 to 4:30 at Dakar Hall. It's an SMS-based system, which is an innovation, whereby at Scouts headquarters in Uganda, we're able to reach all our Scouts in the whole country using SMS. It's almost like Facebook, WhatsApp, that kind of, but this one is innovation for technology, for development in the society. How we do it is we developed a system which uses SMS. So at headquarters, we're able to send one message to all the Scouts across the country. They're able to give us feedback on all the activities they're doing on ground. We're able to monitor, research, and also guide them on the activities to do. it is all mapped in the system, and the system is able to give us a report instantly. We are being supported by UNICEF, and the message that we brought here today is that we are taking it global in scouting, so that any country that is interested in this new technology, you'll be able to use it for free with support from UNICEF in your own country. So you link up with us, we connect you to your UNICEF office, country office in whichever country you are in. They link up with you and support you to set up the system. It's free of charge for all scouts, so they can be able to communicate to you as the leaders of the association for free. You are able to also guide them on what activities to do at what time, and it has helped us a lot in Uganda for response system, whereby if there's a flood or flooding in a certain area, or landslides for that matter, we are the first people as scouts to get the information from the people on the ground. We even get it before police and any other intelligence system. So we are the ones now to guide them. It has made us a very valuable partner to the government and all other agencies who are doing similar things. We also guide the government on what interventions to do on ground, so that they don't just speculate and say, well, we think these people need this. We tell them, look here exactly, what is it that you want? Then they ask, what is the cause of this outbreak of disease? As our presenter said here, the people know more than us, you understand? So we get to ask them, and you get all responses. Out of the 5 million scouts we have, you would get 2 million saying that, you know what, there's corruption in this area. This particular person is stealing our funds. So when we forward this to the government, it helps in stimulating a lot of activities, and we get a lot of interaction of scouts and actual implementation on ground. So you're all welcome to join us to proceed with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So you see a lot of more interesting things coming up. Yes, we have. If you have, I've tried to repeat the questions, and if you want to say something more, you welcome to come up here, because we have the online. There are some marks where I'm not allowed to move outside of them for the online. So, yeah. If it's a quick question, I can just repeat it, or you come up here. Come up here. I think it's nicer, so they can see you as well.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for the...
I think between the green one.
Okay. Oh, there you go. Okay. Hello. Thank you. So, well, thank you first very much, Thomas, for this insightful lecture and talk about the trends in business and the relationship with scouting. I can identify like 3 very key things that I want to ask you some insights. The first, well, my name is Raimundo Tamayo from the Mexican Scout Association, and definitely resilience, or the capacity to stand up after failures, after tries, after constantly striving to achieve like an entrepreneur, whatever situation, an entrepreneurship. The second one being the team system, definitely. And the third one, systems thinking. I was reading recently an article of the Stanford Center for Social Innovation, and they were saying that the characteristic of a leader in the innovation field is systems thinking. And the global thinking in scouting, like a local scout having a global perspective, understanding that he's part of a global movement, is definitely a key competence or skill that in the business world will surely be very valuable. Now, the question is not precisely validating what the model that we have been implementing already does, but thinking how can we do it better, what types of adaptations does it need to have, if any, or how can we measure it so that the business world knows these competences, these skills, and they can give value to it, to scouting. And as well, how do we build upon our strengths as an organization? Perhaps like an entrepreneurship contest within the Jamboree on the Air or Jamboree on the Internet. But I would be interested in knowing your insights with all these trends and everything on how can we communicate it better so that we can engage our business partners in a more effective way. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is something where more ideas can come up, but just briefly, I think one thing to start with is how we talk about what we do in scouting, how we phrase it in a way that people outside of the movement could also understand, because we use a lot of scout lingo where we talk about things that might not be obvious to everyone else, but if we consider what's the real meaning of it. Like learning by doing is pretty obvious, but if we explain that that's a method that we work with, not just a cool phrase, I think that is one starting point to be sort of better communicating it. And that also goes into how you present yourself when you apply for a job, that you are maybe not just putting up a title from that you've been a scoutmaster or what you've been doing in scouting, but that you actually explain what that means. For example, that you might have been responsible for 100 volunteers running a big event, and try to explain that to people that have not been scouts. And in some cases, I think even just putting your scouting merits on your curriculum when you apply for a job. I know it's very different from country to country. In some countries, your volunteer work is appreciated and very important when you apply for a job. In some other countries, it's not a custom to put up the voluntary activities on your curriculum. But I think we could push the message. And actually, one eye-opener to me was when I, a year ago or so, talked with friends in WAGs about Girl Scout cookies. And someone explained to me that in the US, that is more or less an entrepreneurial education and an entrepreneurial contest. You train young people putting up their own business plan and work together in teams and decide where to go and how to sell cookies and what they want to achieve. And I think a lot of things we're doing is not very far from the perspective of sort of an entrepreneurial training session. And there's one very successful business person in Sweden that once said that, like, the entrepreneurs have already been around. They used to be in the organizations, the NGOs like Scouts, etc. Now they are starting social entrepreneurial companies instead of social businesses. And I think that's also a case where we might be an interesting force to work together with social entrepreneurs and see that the step is actually not that big anymore. So just a couple of ideas. I don't know if someone else want to add to the questions our friend from Mexico came up. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Thomas. My question is very quick and very simple. The things we... All right, okay, my name is Sanda. I'm from Madagascar, International Commissioner. My question is a very quick one. It will be because we are going to deal with a lot of people. We deal with a lot of different ideas. Everybody got his own strategy, his own ability, something like that. So how to deal with a different idea, and especially how to deal with oppositions. It's very oppositions in all terms. Huh? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. That is a very good question, because obviously in every kind of development phase, you need to be open to the different ideas, but at some point you need to reach a decision. And I also know that the way of reaching decisions are very different from different cultures. Even when we compare just Sweden and Denmark, which are neighbor countries, we actually see that people that are experienced managers in Sweden go to Denmark and sometimes fail miserably because of a lack of communication and the other way around. So it's not easy to come up with one answer on how to do it, but I would say that you need to find a way to integrate the decision making in the process of being more open to ideas, but also be very clear from the beginning. How will the decision be taken? Who will take the decision? And when will the decision be taken? So people don't get disappointed if not all their ideas are integrated. But I also recommend, as a sort of second part of answering that question, is to attend Lars Kolin's talk later this week, because he has written a whole book about what he called unboss, how to be a boss in a world of people that want to have their ideas coming up all the times and get into, and how to motivate young people getting into companies with new ideas and maybe you could call it opposition as well. So there's a link between this part, and Lars has been manager for a lot of larger companies and more experience of that. I have more the experience of building them myself, and then I'm being the sort of the oppositional part versus other big companies instead. So, yeah.
Thank you, Thomas, for inspiring us. I have just a few questions because... Oh, yeah, I have to stand there. Sorry. My name is Frostberg. I'm from the Danish Scout Council. And I am from Denmark. I don't want to talk about the differences between Sweden and Denmark, but there is many. I could talk a lot about that, but... Oh, yeah. I'll try not to. That's right. Well, my question was to you, Thomas, but now I'm presenting it this way. There. My question is, I agree with you that we're really good in engaging people in scouting. We're really good in helping connect people in different ways. But I think there's one big difference often between scouting and also business life is that we have a purpose of educating young people. And I mean, the purpose of business normally are to earn money. So if I want to engage a lot of people, it's easy for me to say, I want to engage you because we have a higher purpose of educating young people. And not saying, I want to engage you because I want to earn money. You know, so I think there's a big difference. And maybe you can elaborate a little bit on the difference between being purpose-driven or being money-driven, or is there any differences there? Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, of course, there is this very obvious difference between the reason of running a company and the reason of running an organization like the Scout movement. And I would say there are a few things that actually, with the recent development, makes it interesting to see that the gap might not be always as big as that. First of all, I would say the whole open source community within the software industry has partly changed in a very interesting way, where you see a lot of companies that actually have people contributing with the updates and develop things, even for big commercial companies working on the solutions. And I think that they are users, they want to use the product of the company, and they see if they contribute to making that software better, they get something back as well. So they get sort of a kickback that might not be in dollars, but in other sorts of value, which changed a bit of the concept, and it makes it a bit more blurry to see the difference between a commercially driven company and something else. But it's still, I would say, it's still commercially driven. You just get paid in other kind of ways than money on your bank account. It might also be you get paid with attention. People put your name up there and say, like, this person is a very good developer or so, but it's still into the commercial field. So there are obviously differences, but you need to find the motivator, the aspect that drives people to join an organization or a company or contribute in different ways. So yes, obviously it's not the same. I just think that there are similarities that's very interesting to keep in mind when you talk about what we do. And actually, one thing is that when Ericsson appointed a new global president a few years back, he used to be on the national board of scouting in Sweden, and he said that it's one thing to motivate people when I can pay them. It's quite easy. It's much harder in scouting to motivate people that I can't pay. But if I can use those skills as a leader that I learned in scouting or in training for kids in football or whatever area, where I motivate them with other things and can bring that into a company, I have also some extraordinary skills to be a leader and running a company. And just quickly, the second part there, I also see that the area of the social entrepreneurs and social companies are actually bringing the two worlds a bit closer together, which could be both an opportunity for us, but it could also be a threat, because I see that some people that used to maybe put money into different NGOs are now looking more into the social entrepreneurs instead, because they see a more clear and quicker delivery on certain goals. So that might be something for us to consider as scouts as well, or for any NGO for that matter. How do we explain the achievements we make? I mean, we can talk about how many kids go through the program and so on, but do we prove that we have developed and brought back to the world? Just when anyone else, before I take... You wait a minute to take people that haven't asked first. Yeah, welcome.
The green cross here. Yeah. Thanks, Thomas. Like your sharing. So you talk of changing a paradigm from the old innovation way of bottom up and changing to a new one of having everything new, a fresh group of people, engaging different parts of people, not just from the specialist field. But are there any ways, like a middle ground, that can combine the old ways and the new ways without abandoning the old ways altogether? Because, you know, for a lot of people who's been very comfortable with the old ways, it's very hard for them to come out of their comfort zone. Especially for people maybe later in the age, like 50 or 60 plus, it's very hard to them to change everything all at once. So how do you draw this middle ground of integrating the new without abandoning the old ways altogether? Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. I think that it's also very important to keep in mind. The presentation here is trying to sort of point out the direction where the world is going. I don't think that the change is coming in one day or even 1 year, and it's not going in the same path or speed in different countries. So that's the first thing to remember. This is not black or white. This is more the direction rather than a one-step change. Having said that, I think, what especially researchers look at is that if you are not aware of this change and are not ready to sort of embrace it in your companies, you will be at risk. Then again, depending on what country, what industry, etc., it will take longer time or go quicker. In some industry, it might not change as much. In other industries, it's already gone through the whole process and really changed. And one point there is the intergenerational question. Basically, how can you then continue, to use another word from scouting, the listening and supporting leadership of the young people? I think you could see that it's not a fact of sort of kicking out all the old guys and just putting new people in place. It's rather a combination of using the knowledge that's already there, but opening up for new ideas, maybe earlier and faster, and especially making it easier for the new ideas to reach the decision makers early. In that way, I don't see that there is a big challenge for it will still challenge the comfort zone aspect. I totally agree on that, and in some countries maybe more than others, but I think that every country and every region can find their way of having that within the system and using the potential that lies in the different changes we see. So we have time for one or two more questions before I let people in that already have got a chance to ask questions. Is there anyone that have not been up on stage yet that want to do that? Otherwise, we go to first here, and then you get a last question. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, Thomas. My idea is exactly the same with my friend from Hong Kong. But if I go a little bit deeper, is what kind of message can you give, for example, if I go in scouting, you see for the top management, for the head office, something like that, who already got in failure, really got a lot of problems, they already see it, but they not admit they got in failure. But youth can find it. But the problem is to be an intergenerational problem. Do you think adults who got a poor bit, who got something like that, will admit that the solution comes from the youth? It will be difficult. So for me, it's not what will be the solution, but what will be your message. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You mean the message to the adults, how to handle? Yeah, I totally agree. It's much more scary when a young person come up to you and tell you not just that you might have done something in a wrong or stupid way, but that he or she might see a smarter way to do it, because it obviously challenged your position. But I think if you train yourself to be sort of ready and motivated to listen to, as when we listened to Christine Lowe here opening the Congress today, the first step of actually listening and try to understand and embrace, I don't see it necessarily like a challenge of your position. It's another view, another idea. Then you can use that information or that opinion to actually, as a good leader, if you realize that this idea, whether it's coming from someone that's twice your age or half your age, if that idea is better, and if you are open to listening to those ideas, you could actually move into a new direction without being sort of challenged as a leader, and rather the opposite. But it takes some courage to do that, and it takes some courage among your colleagues or friends as well to admit that it's not then a failure. I think that's maybe the key message. It's not a failure to listen to someone else and change your direction if you realize that there's a better idea. I would say the failure would be not listening to the other ideas and not changing when there's a better option. And that's sometimes where we mix up the definition of failure. I would say if you're afraid of changing, that might be a bigger failure. Yeah. Last question before we end the session here.
Thank you, Thomas. So my comment is definitely social innovation is paving the way for a new type of entrepreneurship, of a new type as well of venturing, and creating even emerging markets in populations that would be economically expanding their possibilities. Nowadays, with the millennials and the characteristics that this generation presents, we're seeing that very innovative young people that lack precisely the platform of a multinational corporation to deliver massively or globally these types of innovations might see the Scout movement as an attractive alternative, with presence in over 160 countries, with a capacity perhaps of delivering innovations such as your report, such as other types of things like that. How should now the organization, what would be your perspective on how would you recommend NSOs, or in the case of the World Organization, to better prepare for these challenges that are definitely coming? Population trends, 2030, 2050, where the young people will be, what they will be asking for, what they will be paying for, and how Scouting might be seen as a global platform for social innovators, young people that might be Scouts from other cooperation, maybe North-South, South-South, a lot of different types of interactions. Should we start thinking on empowering adult leaders, or perhaps introducing social entrepreneurship as a key aspect to develop educational material or programs? But how can we still be one step ahead of this era that is coming, and that will surely present with new opportunities as well for young people that, for example, today, being a Scout, the cost of being a Scout is still a challenge for them joining the movement, but entrepreneurship might be, a way to gain all this opportunity of living the program. So how can we prepare for these trends in social innovation, in emerging markets as a movement? No? Thank you.
Thank you. I think you're pointing to a very interesting direction. If we could, in the program and in our educations, integrate the social entrepreneurship direction, not saying that would be the only thing we do, but opening up for that and actually train our young Scouts that this is a direction they could take their sort of commitment. That would obviously strengthen what we do. That would make it sort of the impact of Scouting much greater than what we just do in Scouting, but actually all the additional values we could create in the world to make the world a better place would come out of that. So I think that idea that you just brought up is one first step I think we could take and discuss, and this Congress is one perfect time for that. I think it's also something that the World Conference would be a perfect fora for discussing that kind of questions. Where are we going, and with different experiences from different parts of the world. So yes, I'm totally positive for that. And I also think that the other way around, that there are people that are already running social entrepreneur projects or social companies that we could actually engage in our movement. Sometimes I think we have a tendency to say that if you didn't grow up in the Scout movement, we don't really recruit you as an adult. And when we did a jamboree in Sweden a couple of years ago, we recruited quite a lot of people of my age, or that were definitely grown up and had passed the sort of young Scout ages. And that was kind of a new concept, but some of them then later have told me that, well, they didn't see Scouting as something that they could be part of, because they were not Scouts when they were young. They didn't think they could join when they were adults, and they hadn't realized that they could be part of changing the world together. And what they saw and what they remember from being on a field in Sweden with 40,000 Scouts from around the world, they still carry that memories. And actually, there's one lady that I remember. She was a bit skeptical in the beginning when I started to try to recruit her for a position in the Jamboree as head of our translation team. And she's now one of our most committed leaders on the national level. She's been on the contingent team for the World Moot, and she's just going on with new projects. She's like 110% committed scout, and it's quite fantastic to see that you can bring them on even later. And I think that way we could reach out to social entrepreneurs as well and bring them in and teach us things as well, and we can do joint programs where I think I went to Bill Clinton, the former president of the US, has a big show every year, the Clinton Global Initiative in New York, same week as the United Nations Open. And I went to his annual meeting this year, and when I heard the different organizations and initiatives presenting on stage, almost every time I felt like, well, if they could just add the Scout movement to that, they could, instead of doing it in one place in the world or as a sort of startup in the social entrepreneur field, they could have a global reach where they could have millions of people working with their projects around the world simultaneously. So I think the combination of what we do in scouting and what social entrepreneurs are doing is a really interesting key that we could take much further. Okay, time is out. Thank you very much.